Hello YouTube! What's going on? My name is Darren. I'm a ex-physics teacher, assessment specialist, data scientist. I'm in video games industry for a living, and I've been playing D&D since 2nd ed, and I'm here to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons. Now, this is a response to Shadiversity's video, Run, which was Shad. Well, I'm going to let Shad explain it, actually. You know what? I'll let Shad explain what his video is about, then I'll explain what my video is about after Shad explains what his video is about, because that'll make sense, because he provides that. So let's go.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and you might have noticed I'm wearing my full adventuring kit at the moment because we have a very important topic, and that is looking at the classic Dungeons and Dragons monsters and what perhaps it might be like to fight them in real life, okay? Because certain mechanics that operate in a role-playing game with the rules and things might not necessarily play out the same as real life.
But you can use description and house rules and other tools at your disposal as a dungeon master to kind of bridge that gap, which is part of why I'm doing this video. The other reason I'm doing this video is because, well, he's got a 5th ed character sheet going on there, I think. Yeah, it's a 5th ed character sheet. But when he pulls out his monster manual, he's using 3rd ed stats. So part of it is going to be to talk about the differences between the monsters so that his video makes more sense to you if you viewed it. By the way, go watch his video before you come here. Please watch his video. It's Shad. I mean, I don't have to tell you that. If you're watching my channel, you probably already watched Shad's video. So what am I talking about? You've already seen this video. You saw it 2 weeks ago when it was released. Who am I kidding? But if you haven't, go watch his video. You'll understand sort of the context of what I'm doing here. And you might be thinking, wait, that's not how that works, because it's 3rd ed. So part of it's because it's 3rd ed, and part of it is to try to help bridge the gap between the game and reality through both just narrative tricks you can use, house rules you can use, and just other ways of handling the game so that it makes sense. So that's why I'm here. That's why Shad's there. Let's do this. I might have to break this up into multiple videos, by the way, because that's a 40-minute video already, and I don't have that kind of time to produce usually. So, but we'll see. All right, Shad. Let's do this.
Now, we've got the classic monsters like dragons and stuff, and I've already done videos talking about dragons. I want to talk about the classic D&D monsters that are also at the same time a little bit more obscure. If you play D&D, you've probably come across them, but in terms of mainstream fantasy, they're actually not as common per se.
Many of them, spoiler alert, many of them were just made up by Dungeons and Dragons. A couple of the monsters he talks about are definitely Gary Gygax's originals. Basically, if you've ever wondered where the sort of meme of the DM versus player mentality comes from, it's pretty much Gary Gygax, and it's pretty much because of some of the monsters in this video. So, and I'll talk about that when we get to them. I know a little bit of the history of D&D as well. I've been playing since around when 2nd ed came out, but I've paid attention to the older grognards. I guess I'm a grognard? I don't even know. I'm so old. I hate it. All right, here we go.
Hence why I'm wearing my standard adventuring gear, because it'll be interesting to see if my loadout here would be appropriate to handle all these specific monsters.
Fair.
Or if I might actually want to change it up. And I've done kind of videos on this, what best weapons for a fantasy adventure and stuff. And in those videos,
if you want me to respond to any of those videos, let me know in the comments. I just started after all these videos are already out, so they didn't seem as relevant, but you know, if you want me to respond to them, go for it. You probably don't know that yet, though, because you haven't seen this one yet. Let's go.
I came to the conclusion that you kind of want weapons that can handle a wide array of enemies, but if there are kind of rumors that let you know, yeah, there's a dragon in that den, or a certain type of monster over there, a Medusa or something like that, then you could prepare more specifically. And so what I have here, I have my trusty,
So he basically described how wizards used to work and where the sorcerer class came from, because that's how wizards worked, because you had to memorize your spells ahead of time. So if you knew what you were getting into, you would be prepared for it. And then, of course, they added sorcerers later for reasons. But that's for another video, I guess. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, let's talk about Shad's loadout.
Big two-handed sword. And in terms of the types of swords, yeah, something that has reach, can probably hit multiple opponents, do a lot of damage, and if you are not needing a shield, okay, big two-handed sword right there in my back scabbard, good to go. Got a trusty knife, but of course I would be like, I don't know, some type of ranger knight hybrid, because I have my war.
You just described a fighter. The word you're looking for is fighter. Or fighting man, if you're going with really old school D&D, which we're not. We're going with 5th ed, so the word you're looking for is fighter.
But and yes, this, like, I've done whole videos on shortbow does not mean weaker, okay? This is actually a high poundage bow. It's 110 pound, and it's actually really suited for the adventure because it's much smaller and easy to carry around. I have a video talking about the best type of bow for an adventurer, and I do mention that shorter would be better because I try out longbows in that. And yeah, so if I was adventuring, this is the bow I'd carry.
Yeah, later on in the video, he talks about something that actually ties into the history of why the longbow does a D8 and why the shortbow does a D6, and it's interesting. But I'll get there when he talks about it. He doesn't talk about that, but he talks about something that will lead to that. So, but you'll get that later. You also get some cool house rules later. So yeah, keep watching.
It's so convenient, easy to put anywhere, and very light, but also very powerful. And I feel I'd be fairly decently equipped, and what's also good, my mobility is still quite functional, because I did a whole video like, how many weapons would you end up carrying? Being properly equipped, let's see how well this...
He did forget to bring a bludgeon in case of skeletons, but it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. We'll forgive him this time.
Loadout would fare against some classic monsters, and if I might need to use more specific tactics. I'll need to wear my very authentic adventuring glasses for this.
See? 3rd ed book. I've got D&D Beyond where my monster manual is loaded up. I'm pointing, but it's like near my camera, so that'll be fun.
The Kobold, yes. So the Kobold is a very classic D&D monster. It's one of the lower tier, difficulty monsters. And this text says, Kobolds are short, reptilian humanoids with cowardly and sadistic tendencies. Interesting. In fact, if we have a look at the armor class is 15, but +2 from leather armor.
In 5th ed, their armor class is 12, no armor. The first picture is exactly what the Kobold in 5th ed looks like. Loincloth to cover the cloaca, I guess. I don't even know. And they got a sling and a dagger and no armor. Their armor class is 12 because they've got a 15 dex, so that's fun.
Gambison type equivalent. So, alright, giving you some insight. They spend most of their time fortifying the land around their lairs with traps and warning devices such as spiked pits, trapwires, attached to crossbows and other mechanical contraptions. They're cunning creatures. In terms of combat, they like to attack with overwhelming odds, at least 2 to 1. Good tactic, so you're most likely...
And in 5th ed, they get an ability for that, pack tactics, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later when he goes into some of the stuff with the kobold.
Going to be facing multiple, kobolds in one encounter. Or trickery. Should the odds fall below this threshold, they usually flee. However, they attack gnomes on sight if their numbers are equal. They begin a fight by...
Yeah, that was the thing in earlier editions, which I don't think they talk about anymore. Do they talk about... They do talk about why... they talk about Garl Glittergold attacking their god in Tiamat, in the 5th ed monster manual, so to try to explain it. But before, I think it was a leftover thing from Tolkien, because in the Silmarillion in Tolkien, like every the free races of Middle-earth, Sauron corrupted all of them. Like the orcs are corrupted elves, the trolls are corrupted ents, and I think they were kind of going with that in D&D at one point. So like the kobolds are corrupted gnomes or something. I don't know. But now in 5th ed, they got that Garl Glittergold thing. So maybe I'm wrong about Silmarillion. Not what I said about the Silmarillion, but the connection to D&D. I don't know. Gygax did some weird stuff. So did Dave Arneson.
Slinging bullets, closing only when... Slinging bullets, stones. Closing only when they can see that...
Lead bullets, probably. So the bullet is a hunk of lead. And I know this from when I was in college. I knew some classics majors, and one of the things that they had to do in their Latin classes is translate the insults that the Romans used to write on their sling, like carve into their sling bullets during Roman on Roman conflicts. So that's fun. But yeah, so sling bullets are lead, which will come up in a moment.
Their foe has been weakened. Whenever they can, kobolds set up ambushes near trapped areas. They aim to drive enemies into the traps where other kobolds wait to pour flaming oil over them, shoot them, or drop poisonous venom onto... Oh, well, all right, kobolds are very crafty creatures. There was one item of kit that I wasn't wearing that I'm wearing now, because you cannot forget this one. Absolutely, no matter what adventurer you are, all right, doesn't matter what armor you're wearing, if it's leather, gambeson, chainmail, you should never go anywhere without your helmet.
So D&D kind of treats helmets the way Hollywood treats helmets, that they're kind of optional. It's like, if there's a name on the stat block, they're not wearing a helmet. That's how you know it's him. Yeah, and helmets have no mechanical effect. In, I think it was Baldur's Gate, they had helmets make you immune to critical hits, which was interesting. I wouldn't do that in 5th ed, because that kind of takes away from the adamantine armor, and is also a little bit OP, I think. Maybe. Slightly. But yeah, helmets are important in real life, and I think the medium and heavy armors... Medium, I think helmets are assumed in some of them and not in others, and heavy armor, I think the heavy armors all just assume you have a helmet. Like, if you're wearing full plate, you've got a helmet. If you're wearing half plate, you've got a helmet, right? If you're wearing chainmail, you've got a coif going on, and probably if you watch guys like Shadiversity, Scala Gladiatoria, Scalagrim, and those guys, you'll see that they actually used to wear like a metal, like a small cap underneath the coif, because getting hit in the head with just mesh is not going to end well for you, but having something hard underneath it helped, and then, it was tight up in here to keep the throat protected. And you can check out, I think it's Arrows vs. Armor 2 by Todd's Workshop to see how well just multiple layers of mail can protect your neck. It's actually kind of interesting, but anyway. That's an aside about armor that we don't need right now, because we need to talk about kobolds. He's mostly just going to talk about armor.
Absolutely. This is actually my full kit, because this is an important thing to remember. When I was reading about the kobolds, and they said that they like to basically use slings to begin an encounter, that could be an issue. Slings can be rather dangerous, but they have a massive weakness. Metal armor, especially if you're wearing a full helm like this right here. And so, as a result, for my own kit, the bullets that they throw, the small stones, are actually not that much of a risk to me.
And that's why lead was used, because lead is heavy and soft, so it will deform a little bit, giving it a little bit more purchase against metal. That's why, like, Warhammers have, like, teeth on them a little bit, or, like those little points on the end, and that's so that it would give purchase instead of just being bounced off the armor because of the curvature. It would give purchase, which allows it to transfer its energy without moving. The lead does something very similar. It's why they use a soft metal like lead. It's not that soft, but it's soft enough that if you're like, bing, can't see my arm at all. If you're like, bing, and it hits something, it'll actually impact a little bit and transfer the energy. So that's why bullets and a helmet. The helmet's still good against bullets. Don't get me wrong. If it hits your helmet hard enough to dent your helmet and hurt you, it was gonna shatter your skull. So like you're good. Like a helmet is a good idea. He's not wrong. I'm just saying that bullets are that's why bullets are lead, is to kind of mitigate that. Because again, I say again like I said it before. Slings were often used during like the Roman times, and like in wars against the Celts and wars against other Romans and other similarly armed troops, where armor was not as strong, but shields and helms were very important. Like the Celts wore helmets and shields, and they didn't usually wear a lot of armor, depending on the Celt. I know they had mail, but only some of them did. Some of them were just like naked except for a helmet, and that's the Britons, but they are Celts. Except for like a helmet and shield, they were like naked. But the helm's important because you do want to stop those sling bullets, but also they use bullets, lead, because it might get purchased against the helmet. So sort of like modern militaries, I know the helmets will protect you from almost every bullet type, but it's some like higher caliber and direct hits will possibly go through, but I know if it's not a direct hit, it's going to bounce off and you're going to be fine. And I think it's something similar would be happening here if he's fighting kobolds with a helmet on. But yeah, it's still better than not wearing a helmet. So very good. Good idea. Good job.
And I would be able to survive the potential, ambush that they set. Other types of traps could be an issue. For instance, if they have tripwires that are connected to crossbows and stuff, that could be a problem. Snare pits and everything like that. But say they didn't have any of the aura, we could see them and avoid them if we had like a good rogue who's searching out the traps. Okay, the initial encounter with those slings wouldn't be too much of an issue. And this is where we come to something interesting, where the real world obviously operates differently to a role-playing game based on rules, where in the role-playing game, if they, like, the armor I'm wearing effectively would be what? Breastplate or maybe half plate, and so...
The armor you're wearing is brigandine, which is a bunch of plates, you know, riveted onto fabric, which is, I think, almost the exact... Let me look it up here, but I think that's almost the exact definition of splint mail, isn't it? This item is made of narrow vertical strips of metal riveted to a backing of leather that is worn over cloth padding. Flexible chainmail protects the joints. Okay, mail. Chainmail's not a thing. And what did they say for scale armor? This is a coat and leggings and perhaps a separate skirt of leather covered with overlapping pieces of metal, much like scales of a fish. The suit includes gauntlets. Okay. So brigandine's more along the lines of scale or splint. Probably either one. Take your pick, depending on if you're wearing just the brigandine and some armor up top, but you're keeping your legs free for the mobility. It's probably medium armor, so I'd go with scale. If you were wearing the actual splinting on the arms and legs, it would be the splint mail with the brigandine, you know, in the helm. That would be splint mail. Yeah, so that's sort of how it translates. I know scale mail is supposed to be like actual scales, but those are kind of scales. Coat of plates, brigandine, very similar. That's how I would rule it anyway. So if you're trying to figure out what a brigandine would be in D&D, go with splint or scale, depending on how much coverage you got. Yeah.
If without magical enchantments and everything, my armor class, according to 3.5 rules, would be something, if I give myself, what, a +2 dex, might even be too generous, but let's just go with that. My armor class could be something around the 16 to 18 range.
And never stat yourself. Because, like, it gets bad fast. But scale mail would be 14 plus dex. If that was scale mail, which is what I would call it because he's got his legs free to get that dex bonus. So if he has a +2 dex, he's maxed out his scale mail. He's got a 16 armor class. If he had put some leg armor on, it would be a 17 armor class. So only a little bit better if you wear legs. So yeah, that's probably what I would give him for that.
Okay. The thing is, though, if they just roll high enough and they even have +1 or a couple to their attack roll, there's a good chance that they could still damage me, all right, with the slings. Slings don't do a lot of damage in, you know, our D&D rules. Now, that might be appropriate if I was wearing armor. Not wearing armor, slings can be lethal. And it's a bit of a contradiction that slings do.
Well, again, so slings do, so the Kobold does 1d4 plus 2 damage, which should on average be about 4.5 points of damage, which will kill a commoner. So, yeah, the problem here is not with the damage ratings, it's with hit points. And I have a whole video on bounded hit points if you want to try to make that more realistic. But even with bounded hit points, you're still in the 20, you still got like 20 hit points of your fighter. So, yeah. Slings don't do a whole lot of damage, but, you know, I think they do they kind of do less damage if they don't hit you somewhere vital. So it's, yeah, I guess. Sure. We'll go with it.
Do so little damage when in actual fact they can kill people with a good shot. And it doesn't seem like the damage rating for slings allow that in the rules.
It doesn't allow it against player characters. It allows it against NPCs, no problem. And which is what I was trying to say with the talking about commoners thing. That's, yeah, D&D is weird. Hit points are weird. So, fun fact, the hit point was originally developed for a naval combat game, and it was the amount of hits to the hull of a ship from a certain type of shell before the hull would be compromised and the ship would sink. So everybody should only have 1 hit point, because I don't think anybody can take a shell and live. But, you know, here we are in a game with way too many hit points in general. But it's the game. I keep people, just keep people low level, and it's not a big problem. But once you start getting up to like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th level, the hit points start getting out of hand, and with monsters they get out of hand quick. But that was a different video. That's called Bounded Hit Points. Look it up. It's got horrible audio.
In real life, they have that potential, but that potential is almost nullified completely if you're wearing proper armor. And like,
That's why they use lead.
depending on the size of the bullet, might even have trouble getting through the eye.
It would definitely have trouble getting through the eye hole. And again, even if it's lead, it's going to have to hit like really direct in a really vital spot to even get the kind of purchase to put all the energy inside. If the energy's getting diverted at all, you're fine. So, and I guess the high roll would be hitting just right. But yeah, eye hole, you're probably safe from a lead bullet or from a sling. I mean, obviously from a smaller bullet wouldn't be. Yeah. Anyway.
Slit. And so, short of a 1 in a million shot, I am mostly protected.
A 1 in 20 shot! I hate my life right now. Just kidding.
Nigh invulnerable to slings, not going to be an issue. And it doesn't matter what they roll, okay? Slings, for the most part, will not be able to offend someone wearing proper armor. So aside from the...
But you're not wearing anything on your legs. And they're going to swarm you and just start shanking you. And they're going to hamstring you, bring you to the ground, pull off your helmet, and stab you in the face. Which he talks about later in this video as a real tactic, and I'm going to bring up a house rule that I would suggest to emulate that. With kobolds, you don't need a house rule to emulate it, because they have pack tactics, which gives them advantage on the attack roll against a creature if at least one of the kobold's allies is within 5 feet of the creature and the ally isn't incapacitated. Basically, they swarm you and they just start stabbing. And they take you down, they cut you down. It's death from 1,000 tiny, angry, yippy little cuts. It's bad.
The sling, kobolds also use spears. Good choice for them. They're shorter, they get range. The thing is, though, the size of the spear that they are using, if we can see that right there, in comparison to their height, is only about yay big. It's not a very long...
I think that's why they didn't even bother in 5th Ed to give them spears. They're just like, daggers. Also, it gives them the same damage, 1d4, with the ranged and the melee, which is another consideration, so that it's basically the same. It's basically the same. It's the same attack. It's +4. It's 1d4 +2. That's what they do. If you're 30 to 120, if you're 30 feet away, they do that. If you're 5 feet away, they do that. It was a design choice to make 5th Ed easier and to make playtesting real easy. To be like, it's just 1d4. That's what they do for damage. 1d4 +2. It's all good.
Spear at all. It's a small javelin in comparison to a real person, and so even though it gives them a little bit of reach, it's not actual reach in comparison to a full-size person. And then as a result, my current kit actually works quite effectively to take out kobolds. And so I just get the sword out, and this type of sword, look at the size of this thing, right? Is actually quite suited to taking on kobolds because they attack in greater numbers. And so by having such a long blade here, a good wide slash would actually offend more than one opponent.
And in the Dungeon Master's Guide is an optional rule that I suggest you use in a situation like this, Shad. And I don't think it existed. Maybe it existed. No, there was feats in 3.5 to do this. That's what it was. You had to take feats to do this in 3.5. In 5th Ed, there's an optional rule where if a pristine kobold, he has all 5 of his hit points. 5 hit points. He's got all 5 of them. He comes in range and you hit him. And you do enough damage to take out all 5 hit points. You do more than 5 damage. You can move your sword into the next kobold. And it's only if you take a pristine creature down to 0 in 1 hit, which I have a video about responding to a Bob the Builder video that talks about this. It's weird, but they're doing it to make it simplistic. So they only want it to work on certain enemies. And if they said, CR less than 1, it would have been like, but then the CR system's junk. So it's trying to get that simplicity in game design versus what they intend, and yeah, it gets weird because if the kobold got a hangnail on his way to attacking you, you couldn't take him down even if you did 10 damage, so you couldn't hit his friend. So like it's weird. So hit the pristine ones and cleave into the next guy, and then don't hit him. Hit the pristine guy next to him on your next attack, and that's how you take out kobolds. So yeah. If you're using that rule, it's the one time you don't want to go for the already damaged guy. You want to go for the pristine guy so you can cleave into the already damaged guy. And always cleave into the already damaged guy so that you can kill as many of them as you can because economy of action. So yeah, little bit of tactical advice for the players there. Hope my players are watching this, because then they can do that to my NPCs. It'll be great.
And has a good chance of not only keeping them at bay, but killing more than one in a good solid strike. And so, big sword like this, quite effective, and the cutting ratio also enables you to potentially do higher damage. It's not to say things like halberds wouldn't be effective, they really would. The high damage, you would have a much higher chance of killing a kobold in one good solid hit with something like a halberd than even my big sword, okay? The damage potential is just so much higher. But then, of course, we come to the trusty bow, okay? Instead of getting yourself into dangerous ranges, just take them out with the bow right here. And yes, you can shoot a bow wearing armor, even with a helmet, right? You just go down and you can get the job done like so. I think kobolds, yeah.
Looks like you're going to have trouble seeing what you're doing. That looks like the eye slit was blocking your vision a little bit there, Shad, but that's all right. I mean, you can operate the bow, and, if there's that many of them, which if it's kobolds there will be, you can just kind of aim at the main body and hopefully hit somebody. So it's all good. And there's no rules about helmets affecting your vision in D&D, because we don't even have rules about making sure you wear them. So, good job. Go on it. Get it done. Whatever.
I feel well prepared for a kobold, but they're not the only creatures. We have a number to...
Again, until they swarm you and just start stabbing into the gaps of your armor, which we'll talk about how to do that in general later, but kobolds get it again with pack tactics. So
get to. In fact, all the tactics that we're kind of coming to in this discussion, I might want to record them and keep track of what would be the best types of weapons to use against certain monsters and stuff. Good thing, I have a very useful tool to help me out with that. And that D, yet it has this video. Okay, so this monster is a
he wants if you do get campfire, use his code. I'm not advocating it. They're not paying me. I'm not saying anything bad about it either. I'm just saying if you want to get it, use his code. They're not paying me. If you get campfire, if you want to pay me, email me. We can talk.
Classic one, but you don't see it much outside of D&D, yet it has really interesting elements that could change up the way that you would fight it. And that is the Mimic.
The Mimic is not found outside of D&D because it was made up by Gary Gygax as a dungeon creature to mess with his players. Oh, you just keep grabbing treasure chests. You're not checking them for traps or whatever, right? Oh, you check them for traps, or you just, use your 10-foot pole to open them so that the traps don't get you. That's okay. You're now stuck to it. That's pretty much the history of the Mimic in a nutshell. The Rust monster is a similar I hate my players kind of monster. And another monster he talks about later is also a kind of an I hate my players. It's a little bit of a different history than the Mimic, although it shares some history with the Rust monster, which we'll talk about.
It's the Mimic. So a Mimic is a creature that can essentially shapeshift to objects of similar mass to its own size, and it can change the pigment of its own skin. And as a result, it often turns itself into treasure chests to lure would-be adventurers.
Treasure chests, chairs, anything somebody would interact with and not think too hard about. In fact, treasure chests are probably one of the worst things to use as a Mimic, unless you're just trying to be basic, because they're iconically shown as treasure chests. I think probably the first Mimic was a treasure chest. That's my guess. But yeah, they can be any kind of object. One of my favorite jokes at D&D is, guy walks into a tavern, they're chatting. He makes a joke about a Mimic. It's like, my friends laughed, the bartender laughed, the bar laughed. We hacked the bar to pieces. It was a good time.
And this is the crazy stuff, it has adhesive skin. When you touch the Mimic, you get stuck to it, and then it morphs into like some monstrous, chest thing with teeth. It also can morph arms out of it and grapple you, and start to crush you. And so,
great monster. Great monster.
Mimics are a bit crazy, and this is the description they have. The Mimic is a strange and deadly creature that can change its pigmentation and shape. It uses this ability to lure hapless victims close enough to slay them. It is said that Mimics are not natural creatures, but were created long ago by a now forgotten wizard. Gee, thanks, mate! Have you ever thought it like Mimics there? They're nasty, right? Ever since these terrible things have served to guard treasure.
Yeah, a lot of early D&D to make up for the random crap Gygax threw in. He basically just used the Lucy Lawless from The Simpsons approach. A wizard did it! It's all good. The wizard did it. Just go. And half the dungeons were owned by wizards. That's why it's Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because it's an old school, early D&D dungeon. And, yeah. How does this make sense? A wizard did it, and he was crazy. Just go. Just stop asking questions. Roll some dice. You're gonna die. It's pretty much early D&D.
Is. It's a good thing to throw into a treasure room to garner. Yeah, I agree. Mimic can have almost any dimensions, but usually is not more than 10 feet long. A typical mimic has a volume of 180 cubic feet, 5 feet by 5 feet by...
Yeah, third ed, he's about to mention some weight too. Third ed got weird with the measurements, and it got to the point where you're like, your halfling or gnome is like the same height and weight as my toddler. He's not doing damage. Like, it got a little silly in third ed. They dialed that back a little bit and made things a little bit more closer to what instead of just making a human smaller, they kind of went, oh, you weigh a little bit more to kind of make it make more sense. So it's a little bit, yeah, they get weird with the weight. You're about to find some, he's about to throw out some interesting numbers.
6 feet and weighs about 4,500 pounds. Wow, this thing is heavy. This is real. This is a big thing.
I'm surprised you know what that is in Celsius. 'Cause I don't.
5 feet by, so it's almost about 5 feet, about yay big, but actually no, so
it fits in a square.
Mimics can be big, wow. A mimic often surprises an unsuspecting adventurer, lashing out with a heavy pseudopod. So that's like a limb. It grows like limbs in it.
A false pod.
Gonna hit things. The creature does not necessarily fight to death if it can succeed in extorting treasure or food from a party.
So they used to speak common. I don't think they speak anymore. Although most mimics have only predatory intelligence, a few rare evolve greater cunning and the ability to carry on simple conversations in common or undercommon. Okay, so you can let them speak if you want to. I liked it when they could speak, because that just made it more interesting. But, you know, like, oh, don't kill me. It's just fun. It's like I'm at half or lower hit points, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah.
Interesting. So you could just appease it. If you're aware of it, it's like, I just give it some treasure or some...
Use that influence action from One DnD.
Food that you might not want to part with, and it might not have it on you, okay? Now, yes, it has the adhesive thing. It talks about it here. Crush attack, yes. Mimic deals 1d8 plus 4 points of damage with a successful grapple. So basically, yeah. Mimic can assume the general shape of any object that fills roughly 150 cubic feet. Should not stable the size. All right. Interesting. Part of the adhesive ability that a mimic has is that every time you strike it with a weapon, there's a chance your weapon will get stuck on the creature. So unless you're able to kill it...
I don't think it has that anymore. I'm trying to look. Let's see. The mimic adheres to anything that touches it. A huge or smaller creature adhered to the mimic is... Oh, it's anything that touches it. Object form only. Mimic is also grappled by it. Ability checks made to escape this grapple have disadvantage. Okay, so maybe when you attack it just grapples you. Or you can just drop your weapon, I guess. Mimic has advantage on attack rolls against any creature grappled by it. So that's pretty cool. Nifty.
In one blow, that's a problem. That's actually a very significant issue that you want to deal with. And if you're aware and you know the abilities of a mimic and that your weapons could get stuck in it, if you come across it, the first tactic you would want to do is not hit it with melee weapons. You would go straight for ranged, get some distance, and just fill it full of arrows and damage as much as you can.
That actually seems to be the answer to a lot of these questions and is kind of good advice in general. Kill it from a distance, or if you've got spellcasters, kill it with fire. That's pretty much the answer. Yeah, just bow. 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 It's a fake bow. I have a 25-pound horse bow in my closet, but we're not going there yet.
That's the primary thing. The danger is, what if you weren't aware that it was a mimic and you actually thought it was a chest and you tried to open it and your hands are stuck to it? Oh boy, that's a problem. Let's hope that it was just one hand, because if one hand is stuck to it, okay, all hope is not lost, but you are now in very close range. So close that your big sword is not going to do much help, because, again, you're touching the thing. And so the next best weapon you could do if you're stuck is grab your dagger, okay? And just stab it to death. Now, daggers, in my opinion, have been mistreated in lots of role-playing games for the low damage they are given. I have a whole video discussing about how role-playing games get damage wrong. Check out the whole video. There's a lot of detail in that.
Yeah, I've seen that video. I think the main point that's missing here. Well, here he'll explain why he says it, and I'll explain
And
why.
one of the takeaways in that video is that a dagger can easily do much lethal damage as like swords and other large weapons. Like, think about a spear. A spear usually has a much smaller blade on the end and will
Yep.
penetrate nowhere as deep, or just equivalently deep even, as you could get with a good solid stab from a.
But most people aren't doing that when they're attacking with a dagger. D&D, the combat assumes you're trying not to that you're hitting and you're trying not to get hit. So it's mostly quick slashes. Should have brought out my LARP dagger to show that, but if you're doing quick slashes, you're not doing as much damage. Those big beefy hits you're talking about are when you score a critical hit, or I think he brings up the rogue in a second too, and yeah, obviously sneak attack, you're just shanking him. But yeah, that's most like when a fighter swings a dagger, they're not because that's leaving them way too open. You wouldn't do that if you've ever done knife fighting. You keep one hand here, and then you kind of, use this hand to move things out of the way. I would have just cut my own hand off. I'm terrible at it. But yeah, you keep the person at bay, you keep in front of you, and you slash a lot. A lot of people like to do ice pick grip. There's a guy, I forget his name now, but there's a sword guy that's been talking about ice pick grip a lot, especially with swords, and why that's a terrible idea. With daggers, the only reason you would use ice pick grip in a medieval context is because some of the training manuals do tell you to do that because you want to get close to the guy. So you want to get right up in on him if he's got a sword, and you want to jam your arm against the sword, and that gives you extra strength because just the blade might not work as well. And that's only if you're planning on jamming and getting in on him and grabbing him and then trying to stab him later. Otherwise, you want to use your dagger out because it's better for defense, better for offense. But it's not going to do as much damage as the hit you just did. So that's where the D4 kind of comes from. That, and they just said it was shorter, so they gave it a D4. But also with the spear, spearhead's shorter than a dagger. But you plunge that whole thing in because you've got distance, right? You're just like, just poke. Get all that distance. You're going to poke it in because you got the whole haft to defend yourself with, so. There's that. But yeah, in certain circumstances, though, you should be able to do a lot more damage with a dagger, and you don't get that ability in D&D. I have an idea for a house rule for that, for grappling situations. I was gonna wait for Basilisk, but maybe I'll do it now. Nah. Yeah, maybe. Well, I'll let him finish his dagger rant first.
A dagger, yet a spear does way more damage than a dagger does. It's a bit of a.
One more damage on average. We're talking 2.5 versus 3.5 from the die, so not that much more.
An error in terms of how they operate in that regard, because a dagger is actually capable of doing severe lethal damage. And if you are up close, stuck to a mimic, and you just start laying into it, start hacking it, and you have your armor on, and you just go, ah! And if you want to slice it down and just carve it up.
Also not something you're doing in combat, because if you're slicing it down, you're getting hacked. But in a situation where you're just wrestling with a mimic, yeah, you would slice it down. So obviously in this context, he's 100% right, but that's not the context that D&D assumes for its attack rolls and damage rolls. It's assuming the context of up and fighting and swinging and trying not to get hit. So that's why you get your dex bonus, even though you're not actively dodging. You just get your dex bonus because you are actively dodging. You're actively dodging and attacking at the same time. It's just assumed that you're doing all these things. So describe as you need to.
When you're stabbing it, you would actually be in a position to do huge amounts of damage, because this is one of the things. People think, oh no, now you're so close to the mimic that you are completely vulnerable, but guess what? The mimic is really close to you.
So, yes, you are close to the mimic and completely vulnerable. It gets advantage to anything it's grappling in 5th ed, and its bite attack does 1d8 plus 3 piercing damage plus 1d8 acid damage. So yeah, no, you are very vulnerable. You don't want to do what Chad's talking about. It's what you have to do if you're stuck in that situation. That's where it comes from. And in fact, yeah, I'm going to bring up my house rule idea now, just because the Mimic kind of uses something similar. So the Mimic has advantage against creatures that is grappling. I am proposing kind of a house rule to make grappling a little bit more interesting. It does kind of throw the One DnD grappling thing out the window, and I'll explain that in a later video. It's been over a half an hour, so I'm going to do that in a later video. This is like a 40-minute video. It's going to be like an almost an hour-long video, so I'll do it later. I'm going to end with the Mimic. When Mimic's over, I'm going to end. But yeah, so here's the idea for the house rule. When engaged in a grapple, if you're using a weapon that does not have the light property to attack the creature you are grappling or being grappled by, you attack at disadvantage. This is to show, yeah, you can't reach, the sword would be a liability, as Shad very correctly points out. Because of course he's correctly pointing out, he does medievalist weapon stuff all the time. It would be a liability. A light weapon, you might be able to get, like you have like a hand axe, you might be able to get hits in. Sure, we'll let it go. The other part of the house rule is with a dagger, you attack at advantage. This lets you pull out the dagger and start hacking in. The advantage, because that ups your chance of a critical from 5% to like 9 point something percent. Not 10%, because in the case that you roll 2 20s, that's only 1 crit, not 2. So you have to subtract off 1 over 400 from the percentage, from 10%, and then it's 10% minus 1 over 400. Or 0.1 minus 1 over 400. But yeah, it's like 39 over 400. But that's the chance of getting a critical, so you're doing more damage because you're almost doubling your chance of critical hits, and with advantage and being that close. Rogues, of course, who get sneak attack because they have advantage now. So using a dagger in a grapple could be an advantageous thing to do. It also allows you to take out, he's going to talk about armor later with the Basilisk, and one of the ways that you dealt with knights in the Middle Ages was you just swarmed them. Hope you don't get poleaxed on the way in. Hope some other guy is the one that gets poleaxed, maybe the guy you don't like. And then you just start going for the gaps. You go for the voiders, you go for gaps in the neck if they don't have a ton of mail there. You go for the eye slits. You try to get under the helmet. You try to get between the plates. You just do what you need to do with that dagger. Plate mail in 5e, if I recall correctly, is, let's see, it is an 18 armor class. So guy in plate mail comes at you, that's 18. You're going to have a hard time hitting that. Maybe with your athletics check versus his athletics check, you might have a better chance. Because we're talking like maybe you're, if you're like maybe you're at +4 because you're a peasant, or +2 maybe because you're a peasant. He might be at +5, but that's still a better chance. 1d20 +2 versus 1d20 +5, it's still a much better chance of winning that contest than using your +2 attack to get over an 18 armor class. Or 20 if he's got a shield. Like, you're not doing that. Which is why the One DnD idea of removing it from athletics and acrobatics and making it an attack roll against armor class is kind of a bad idea. Maybe just everybody gets proficiency and your just grapple is... Everyone's proficient at grapple. Just pretend like it's just the skill you have proficiency in. Like, use any skill with proficiency in strength. Go. Strength with proficiency bonus versus strength with proficiency bonus, or dex with proficiency bonus. Maybe that's the way to do it, but I think that using armor class is bad because now my plate mail protects me from being grappled, where in reality, the only way to deal with plate mail is to grapple and then start stabbing, and then giving advantage to the dagger gives that peasant a much better chance of actually hitting the guy in the plate armor that they're grappling. So that's the idea of the house rule. Advantage with the dagger, disadvantage with anything that's not light when you're grappling against an opponent that you are grappling or being grappled by. So in this case, with the Mimic, your dagger would give you advantage in the attack roll. So you would drop your sword, pull out your dagger, and just start shanking it and hoping that it's not going to eat you, because it gets advantage to bite you because it's a Mimic. So, yeah, still nasty. Don't touch Mimics. Shoot every chest in the dungeon. Just like, target practice on the chest. Dink. Oh, look, it screamed out in pain. More arrows. But yeah.
And if you're stuck to it, it is stuck to you. And don't forget that you are a dangerous individual as well. The Mimic could be more scared of you, should be more scared of you for what you could do to it than what it can do to you. And even if you can't use your large weapons, you're so close that this thing right here should be able to take out that thing in short.
Hence why I say advantage when you're grappling, when using a dagger, because you're absolutely right. It should be able to do more. And advantage is the quick and easy 5th ed way of making that possible.
Work, especially if you go crazy, just like, because you're stuck to it. Yeah, you would be able to kill it pretty quickly because by being so close, it's not going to be able to dodge you, okay? And it doesn't really have any defenses or
Yeah, it's got 1 point of natural armor and 1 point from Dex. And I mean, you don't lose your Dex modifier in 5e. This isn't 3 where they had like 8. Like, what was it? They had 4 armor classes. Oh, I was saying 8, and that was hyperbolic. But they actually had 4 armor classes. Like legitimately, there was 4 different ACs. There was touch and flat-footed, and it was I forget what there was a third one. There was regular AC, there was touch AC, there was flat-footed AC, and I can't remember what the last one was. Maybe it was armor only. I don't know. And that was flat-footed. I don't remember, but whatever. It's too many armor classes, but 5th Ed only uses the one, which is why it's better to not use armor class with grappling, in my opinion.
Or a shield. It didn't look like it had great armor. In terms of its
12.
armor, it has 15, -1 for size, +5 natural armor, so it's high.
In 5e, they're medium, so they don't get... So the size thing, they were large in 3rd edition. They're medium in 5th Ed. They're smaller and less heavy, because that was ridiculous, like 4,500 pounds. What? And they have a 12 armor class now, 1 point of natural armor, 1 point from Dex. Because they have a 12 Dex.
It is a little bit thicker than the average human. I still think with a good solid you can get through it. The dexterity bonus will basically be nullified, okay? It can't dodge you being that close. So take advantage of that, lay into it, and I think you could make short work of that mimic. Wow, speed is slow. Well, you could just outrun a mimic really easily. Speed is only 10 feet per
15 now. You can still outrun it.
round. Your average speed in D&D rules is 30 feet. So outrunning the thing is easy. That's not much of a threat if you can just outrun the thing. But very much so. If you recognize it as a mimic, you can just, if you have enough space, just shoot it. Arrows, and you can keep your distance. Just move, shoot, and it won't be able to catch you at all. According to, this is 3 point.
Shoot before you touch it, shoot it. A chest, oh yeah, ping, shoot that thing, because you don't want to...
5 rules, things might have been slightly changed. Space attack is grapple. Now its hit points is 52, so it's got a bit of
58 now.
Flesh that you'll need to carve up to do it. But remember, again, daggers, they can do far more damage than they should in D&D, especially up close. Damage is one of those things that D&D has trouble with reflecting. I know it works great for the mechanics of the game. I'm bored. I get that. But in real life, people are much easier to kill, and they're much more vulnerable, and weapons do far more damage than...
Again, check out my video on bounded hit points if you want to make everybody easy to kill. It just gives basically medium creatures have 2 hit dice worth of hit points. Players get maxed that, and some NPCs get maxed that if they've got like names and are important. But yeah, it's your average player has like 9. Your average person would have like 9 hit points. It's dead. So one good crit and you take somebody out.
Is often depicted in the rules. Alrighty, next classic D&D monster.
And I'm going to stop there because I can see how long this recording is. It's been 48 minutes so far. That's a long video. That's a lot of me time for anyone to have to sit through. So tomorrow, or not tomorrow, whenever, the next time I have a chance to record, because I have work and a child to deal with, and I love my 4-year-old. She's great. I got a picture of her right above my camera so I can smile at her. But... don't have a lot of time to record because of her. So when I have a chance to record again, I will cover the rest of it, which is the owlbear, the basilisk, and the displacer beast. So yeah, and I'll probably reiterate that home rule again when he talks about the basilisk. But yeah, so that's my video so far. Shad, great work. You guys that are watching this, thank you for watching this. Again, go check out Shad's full video if you haven't already. Doubt that you haven't, but please do. And yeah, give me a like. If you're not subscribed, give me a subscribe. I love that. I need that watch time, and I need those subscribers. I got like 90 at the making of this video. So like and subscribe if you want to encourage me to do this kind of stuff again. If you want me to respond to any other of Shad's videos, let me know. Or anything else that you want me to respond to, let me know in the comments. All right. Peace out, everybody. Talk to you all later.